Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker Casey, and today we have something slightly different for you all. This episode is not from the perspective of a survivor of cults or high demand groups, but of something slightly different. Of parental narcissism, abandonment, and the reunion of family later on in life. The basis of this episode is also to discuss leadership in high demand groups, and to question how much we know about leadership, and if past life decisions are important, or if current lifestyles should play a part in the power leadership holds, and also some pro bono services that are available courtesy of today's guests, which can be accessed by emailing me or getting in touch via social media at Cult Vault Pod. There is more about these services in the episode. Before we start, there is some usual business. crimecon.co.uk now has different categories of tickets available. There are VIP packages, guest tickets, taster tickets, and now blue light holder tickets, student and carers tickets. These are all available for the weekend of the 11th and 12th of June, and they are all available with instalment plans. And of course, you can get 10% off if you use the code CULT at the checkout. There will be police investigators, private investigators, around 30 popular podcasts, journalists, authors, CSI workshops, sniffer dogs, and so much more. The Ally Awards are still open and they close at the end of this month of March. There is a glass award up for grabs for the winner and a $50 Amazon voucher up for grabs in a giveaway for every person who enters. This month's monthly memoir giveaway features the book Cult Child by author Venny Kocius, the author I interviewed for episode 78 of the podcast. To be in with a chance of winning a physical copy of Venny's book, simply follow, like, and comment on my Twitter or Instagram posts across March at Cult Vault Pod to be in with a chance of winning. But there is some exciting news. If you have caught this episode early enough, Venny has made her ebook available and completely free for all Cult Vault listeners until March the 8th, 2022. Simply visit Cult Child by Venny Kocius on Amazon to download your very own copy today, and I will add a link in the episode description so you can find it nice and quickly. Now let's get on with the show. Here is Laurin to talk us through an incredibly wild but important story. So hello Laurin, and thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be continuing our coverage on Jehovah's Witnesses with a very different take on the subject that might give us all a bit of whiplash given the twists and turns of the story. But would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Hi, I'm Laurin.
And we are going to be discussing your father, who is a practicing Jehovah's Witness.
Yes, he's a practicing Jehovah's Witness and an elder.
This story is a lot for us to dig into and get all of the details across. So let's start a little bit with you. What do you do? Where are you based? And is your father somebody who's always been a part of your life?
We're out of California in the United States, and let's see, what do we do? Well, that'll probably come up a little bit later, but we have a couple businesses, and my husband's an engineer, so mostly have to do with that. But the other part will come up, I guess, later. But yeah, we're in California. I think we were discussing it earlier, kind of a different part of California than everybody. We're up in the mountains, but California all the same.
And is it you and your husband?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry. He's actually here. Oh. Yeah, he doesn't count.
I'm off to the side.
Yeah. Yes, that's my husband, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Glad you're here with us today. Right. So everybody's here and we can get down to business and into the story. So we may hear a little bit of hustle and bustle in the background, but that's because Laurin and Mike have a puppy. So he's kicking around, but that's okay. I always love just seeing people's lives happen around them. So hopefully going to give an extra element to the episode. Yeah, your father, is he an active member of your life, or is he somebody you would class as estranged?
Oh, definitely estranged. Yes. Yes, he is. I actually didn't come into the situation until a couple of years ago. the story is very weird, very bizarre, and it seems like a Hollywood fiction, but unfortunately this is where we're at with it. But I had a daughter that did the DNA test. Otherwise, this probably would have never come up, and that's how all the siblings found me.
Wow! Oh my goodness! So your daughter took a DNA test. Did what, just for curiosity reasons, or was she eager to find out who her grandfather was?
No, I don't know. No, it wasn't for like. I think she just wanted to know her DNA and what lineage she was from and all that. I think that's where she was going from it, but she put her stuff public. When you put your stuff public, people with the same DNA can start finding you. So yeah, that's it. I've always known about him. I knew his name. I knew everything, about that. My mom never lied to me about any of this stuff. So I've always known him. I was adopted, and the woman who adopted was a nightmare, but the man was a wonderful person. And it always seemed to me, if I looked these people up, that it was a dishonor to my father, who was a really good man.
Right. So you come from an adopted at birth?
Well, no. That would be a whole other wild episode on its own. There's nothing good about this. I was adopted. Well, my mom had me. She tried to do things. She was kicked out of the family, and I was removed from her. And she was young. Yeah, she was very young. She was 16 when she had me. And so she was very young, and she was, she was bullied. There's no other term about it. Like she made a decision to have me, and was basically kicked out of the family. And then they somebody got custody, another person got custody, and they would move me around to different places. And I finally ended up with her mother, who is, we finally referred her as the crypt keeper, but she was married to a very wonderful man who did adopt me. And he showed me a different life than maybe the others could, or it could have been. He was a very good man.
Thank goodness for those people, because I feel like they save lives sometimes.
Yeah. We just lost him a few years ago, but he is definitely a character, and he would always forget I was adopted. He would totally forget it sometimes. So he was a character.
I feel like that's fantastic though, isn't it? When people fall out of love and they find new relationships, and they can take on board other people's family members and just accept them as they are for who they are, and love them as their own, because they are their own. So that's really warming, and I'm so glad that you had him to stick by you and take care of you. That's great. So your daughter, she's just interested in her genealogy. She makes her records public, which is a lot of how these cold cases are getting solved now.
We just actually used it just to solve a case not too long ago.
That's incredible. Which kind of alludes to your other line of work as well. Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Your daughter makes the records public, and your father is not the Green River killer, but he does have a questionable past.
He didn't have time to be killing anybody. He didn't have that time. He had no time for extracurricular activities. He had I guess in a lot of partners, a lot of kids, in a short amount of time. And so he had 7, because I counted step, but he had 6 children with 6 different women, and between 1969 to 1973.
So I'm making a little timeline here as we go, because I know that this story gets quite confusing, and hopefully if we've got it all on paper between the two of us, we can make it coherent enough for everybody listening to.
Maybe I'll understand it.
That's you know that things are messy when even you're saying that. So your daughter gets the genealogy results back, and you then does she reach out to your brothers and sisters, or do you reach out to them?
My sister reached out to her, and I have I really was not open to any of this throughout my life. I truly do try to live a less dramatic life. I feel I had enough drama in my life when I was younger. I'm almost spent up. So she knew my feelings on, that I wasn't going to look for anybody or, that kind of stuff. So my sister had contacted her, and it took a while. It took about 4 months, but she finally let me know that, you have all these siblings out there.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a very, I don't know, weird time. It was all kind of a jumble. It was just crazy having siblings calling you left and right. And you're just like trying to figure out what's going on. And then you're hearing why, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot to sort out.
That's so interesting that your daughter was aware of all of these other family members that existed, but held off on telling you because she knew that you weren't really open to hearing about what she found at that time. And your sister contacted your daughter because she made the records public, so people were able to find her. Is that what happened?
Yes. Yeah, so my sister, her story is way more interesting than mine, but unfortunately it's not mine to tell. So my sister we call her the librarian because she knows it all on the family thing. And she was the one who was trying to get this all together. She was trying to figure out what was going on. It's like I said, it's definitely confusing. And when you start getting into his careers and the things that it really gets wild. And so by the time I had contacted, or I had finally said, okay, I'm too curious now, I mean, like, what are you going to do? Like, it's here. So even though I had said I never was going to do this, it was the curiosity got to me. And I had to, if you have siblings out there, I guess you're kind of like, do they look like me? I was raised as an only child. So this is like, insane. So the week that they had contacted me, or I had contacted them at that point, they were about to meet him and the 2 daughters that he raised. And they were all meeting together. Like 3 of the found siblings were meeting with him, his wife, and the 2 daughters that he raised. It just so happened that it all was that same week that I came around all of this. And so they actually had to go for their family reunion and reveal yet another one. So
he was not aware that you existed then at that point?
That is, that's where we lie into personality problems.
Right. Okay. So whether he might have said one thing and meant something else or knew something else, perhaps.
He said you must be Patricia's daughter.
He said you must be Patricia's daughter.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay.
And later on, when I talked to him, he's claiming he never knew. So. Right.
Oh, okay. So I'm just going to keep relaying everything quickly before we move on so that we don't get lost. So your daughter puts the genealogy tests public. I know that when you use services like ancestry.com or
23andMe or something.
Yeah, that's it. 23andMe.
Yes.
If you're already using that to track your own family history, if something gets added to that, you will get a notification or an email or something that there's been so there's been an update on the system. Your sister's checked that out. She's reached out to your daughter. Your daughter's finally told you. You've said no, but then little bits of information make their way back to you, and eventually your interest is piqued enough for you to say, right, I'm ready to know more. And it so happens at that time, everybody's meeting like down the road from you.
Yeah. So we were actually, my husband had taken me away for my birthday, and we were actually on the Queen Mary. So, and I'm getting these phone calls on the Queen Mary. We're out, I think we were at dinner or something, weren't we? Yeah, we were at dinner, and I'm getting these phone calls from these siblings, who are now starting to find out about me at this, while they're all at this reunion, they find out about me. So one of the older brothers said, just told, hey, this is what's going on. Yet another one's come out, because now he's had 2 come out the year before. And now the year they're all together. No, 3. Is it 3? No, 2. 2 come out the year before. They're all getting ready to go together. And here comes the next one. And so I think I've put a damper on their family reunion a couple times.
But did you just gloss over the fact that this was your wedding day?
No. Wait, it was my birthday.
Your birthday. Sorry, I thought you said wedding day. I was about to be like, hang on a minute.
No. It was, maybe I did. Nerves, I guess. No, my husband usually takes me somewhere on my birthday. He's a very good man. So he took me somewhere to my birthday and we went to, and it was crazy. It was a blur. And then we did meet one of the daughters that he sent a daughter to vet me. She says she didn't vet me, but I was vetted. I was totally vetted. So she actually came to the Queen Mary and vetted me that night.
Oh my goodness. So it went from 0 to 100 pretty quickly.
It went from 0 to astronomical levels.
Oh my goodness. And what is that like to have somebody you never knew existed, but is your sister walk into the room and sit down with you?
It wasn't weird. I don't know how to explain it. When we finally did meet it, or that, well, okay, with that sister, it was definitely weird because I was definitely invented and there might have been some beer involved. So how I truly felt, I'm not really sure. I don't so that might have been the feelings might have been a little squashed at that point.
It wasn't a bad meeting, but you were certainly being interviewed.
Yeah, I was definitely being interviewed.
Right. So even Mike kind of got that feeling sitting at the table with both of you.
Yeah, because I had emailed his wife because I realized that this has got to be hard. I mean, they would be astronomically hard if someone came in and told me, well, your husband has all these kids and all these kids keep popping up. And I kept really feeling bad about it for his wife. And so I messaged her actually on Facebook and said, look, I'm not here to break up any family. I'm not here to do anything. I'm just kind of new to the situation and all that. She never answered me. And so I thought, okay, that's cool. No big deal.
Well, you were kind enough to send out, some kind of, well, I would call it an olive branch, but you have done nothing wrong. So it's not that. You were kind enough to offer, I don't know, your condolences, I guess. Yeah, as this unfolded. But if she's married to him, is she a practicing Jehovah's Witness herself?
Oh goodness sakes, yes.
Right. Yes. Okay. So that's a whole other that's a whole other thing, isn't it? So you sit down with your sister, and
this is the child that he raised.
Right. Okay. So she a Jehovah's Witness too?
Sure. Why not?
And at this point, all of the siblings are now revealed and talking to one another. You're all aware of each other.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. At this point, it was, I think there's this weird childish, excitement that comes with the situation and then turns into childhood trauma. So, but you're meeting people, and I was really raised as an only child. So this is a very bizarre situation to have, these people in your life all of a sudden saying, hey, we're siblings. And you're like, wait, but, so there was some, fun with it. There really was. In the beginning, there was a little bit of fun with it. I'm not going to say that we didn't. It was an interesting story. It was weird, and it was then the novelty wears off, and the reality of the questions that are still there, and that reality starts to set in, and it's not as fun.
Were you overwhelmed with the aspect of not just the siblings, but the extended family that came with each sibling? Each sibling has their own family that is, pretty broad, and
yeah, that is definitely overwhelming. Again, I was raised as a little child. I do have a little brother and sister with my mom. My mom didn't raise me, but she's a great lady. I consider her one of my very best friends. I just adore her. And so she has other children. And so I do have, but that wasn't until later in life that I had siblings. So all of a sudden, there's nieces and nephews, and there's birthdays, and there's all these things that you're trying to figure out, and you're trying to connect. And you just basically shut down. You just shut down altogether.
I suppose that you had a family to introduce them to at this point as well. Your own child, and of course Mike.
Mm-hmm. I have two daughters, and then Mikey. Most of my I have cousins from my mom's side, but I wasn't really raised with any of them. And most of my daddy's side they're gone. So we're a very small, quiet family. Our neighbor didn't even know we were here for 6 months. We're a very quiet little family, and so seeing how other families are louder and it's just different environments, I guess. We all raised our families differently. So
if you were all to be in the same room as well, it would be loud and chaotic and overwhelming.
It's crazy. Yeah. It gets crazy, and we usually need a couple days to recover after. It's a mess. It's fun, and it's a fun crazy, and but with the siblings that were not raised by him, there's something natural that came with it. There wasn't any nerves or anything, that it naturally developed. And so that progression, I think we all took it kind of slow. Nobody was jumping in and saying, let's do Thanksgiving. So it's been in a couple of years, and I cherish my relationships with them, and they're very good people.
Wow. So how does your daughter feel about kind of orchestrating almost this situation that you found yourself thrown into?
Oh, well, she orchestrates a lot of drama. So that's kind of her queen bee things. But I think they basically stay out of it. It's definitely weird. It's bizarre. And they're starting their own families kind of thing. So they're not worried about mom's weird life. It's just something to say, yeah, it's weird. I think you saw my daughter's Twitter. That was her just finally just going, what is going on here?
Yeah. The TikTok video as well.
TikTok, not Twitter. Sorry, not to Twitter. Yeah. TikTok video.
You've met your siblings, you all get on. Something you said just before then that I picked up on was that the children that weren't raised by him, you found it easier to connect with. So the children that were, do you feel like there's kind of some friction there, or
no, not friction? No, not well. Okay, there is a little friction, but they were raised Jehovah Witness, and that was kind of what got me into finding out the behaviors. They're very much hot and cold. Like if you're talking to them, you're like the most important person in the room, and when you're not, they don't know you exist anymore. So it's very, very hot and cold, and it was just very weird behavior to me. I'm not normally seeing people like this. And my family are very open, and everybody. I go to the store, everybody calls me mom, or my kids. Oh, you're my kid's name's mom, or whatever, And so it was very weird to see their behavior was definitely different.
Right.
It was definitely different. And so that's when I kind of started wondering, and I started looking into the more and more things. And I guess what ends up here. It was definitely, they were raised in it. There's no contention and no friction. It's just, they were raised with a us against them attitude. And they hold on to that as strong as they can. And they're victims of this. They're not, when they're acting out, and the one in particular has not dealt with having the girls come in well. When they're acting out, it's because they're victims too, and they don't know how to handle it.
So let's go kind of back to the question list and work our way through some of the topics.
Okay.
Now that we have a little bit of an understanding of the situation and position that you were put into a couple of years ago, let's start to work our way through what happened in those last few years and what you found out and what your siblings were all uncovering at this point, and some of the things that eventually piqued your interest enough for you to be like, okay, let's meet. So for anybody that hasn't listened to other episodes of the show, or who isn't familiar with the religion, the Jehovah's Witnesses, can you tell the listeners briefly what an elder is in the Jehovah's Witness Church?
I guess it would be like the pastor, or the deacon, I suppose. It is somebody who has the authority of the church, of that, or not the church, that kingdom hall. It's usually one of several men. I think it can go up to like 12 or something. I really don't. In my research, I should have probably done a little bit better. But he is. He is one of those. So I'm assuming like a minister.
And how long has your father held this position for within the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, he's only held the elder position for a couple of years because he held a gun and a badge.
Right. So for anybody that's not aware, Are you kind of talking church and state separation and how you're not able to have a position in the church like?
There literally is nothing that in his career that he did that was in the church's liking. And so yeah, they're not supposed to hold a political position. At one time he was a sheriff. They're not supposed to hold a gun. It's definitely not politics, definitely nothing that could harm or kill anybody. That's all a big no.
If there was to be conscription all of a sudden and your father was to be given a letter to say that he is being drafted into the armed forces, would he be exempt because of his elder status now? Because religious people, because people that hold religious positions like elder can't bear arms?
Yeah, the way I understand it, he would be expected to say no. If he could not get a religious exemption, somebody in that position would be expected to take the jail time. I may be wrong. This is from my research on it. This is so somebody else who, one of your listeners who it was a JW may be able to correct me, but I truly believe, I think that's how it goes. They would be expected to do the jail time.
So there's very clear lines between somebody in your father's position in the church absolutely cannot take up arms and potentially harm another person in the way that the armed forces going into war would expect you to harm another person.
Yes.
At the time you met your father,
I actually have never met him. I've only spoke to him on the phone.
Wow. Okay. So
I realized I was being handled real quick. His behavior was so, when you're first talking to him, you're trying to figure things out, and his behaviors, the way I walked in with rules, like he had a list of, you're going to do this and this and this, and this is how it goes. And I'm like, that's not going to work for me. I'm not that kind of person. And so he really had this list of rules, and he really tries to navigate the narrative. And unfortunately, I was talking to him about another sibling that had asked me to talk to him. And he said something really stupid. I had just lost a cousin. I was a little upset about it. And I said, well, I didn't call yesterday because of, my cousin died. And he said, yeah, somebody else in the family uses death. And well, it didn't go well after that. So literally the day we were supposed to go meet was the day that him and I just cut it.
Right.
It's hard to deal with a guy like this.
It seems that he is not in a rush to fix or rectify the situation.
He has no intention of rectifying or fixing the situation. He told me he won't talk about a past, which is ironic since he's an elder, and he literally judges people's the past things that they've done, and yet he refuses to talk about his past.
And before he had the position of elder, he was a sheriff. So he has held other higher positions in other lines of work.
Okay, so what I heard, when he's telling me this, and he's not embarrassed about this, I need to point that out. Like, he's not feeling bad about this. So if he got into their good graces by saying he regrets what he did, they have scrapbooks of his stuff, because I truly thought he was lying. I really did. It was so fantastic of a story that I'm like, this can't possibly be your life. You couldn't have possibly held all these positions, and they have proof.
The Jehovah's Witnesses have proof.
No, his family has proof that he held all these positions and did this. So I literally was arguing with the people going, this guy's lying. There's no way he could be doing all of this. I mean, he did a stint with the Secret Service for I think Bush administration, all these things while being a Jehovah Witness. And I thought it was a lie. I really did. I thought it was like, the guy like trying to make his life sound great. And then it turned out to be true. And then when you start to look at it, and he's very proud of this, and he's holding a position telling people how to live their lives. And he has done everything that he's not supposed to.
He's only held the position of elder for a few years. In his badge and gun.
Yeah,
he turned in his badge and gun. Right. So when you were having your birthday meal with Mike, and your sister arrived, was your father an elder at this particular moment in time?
Oh, absolutely. That was the first thing he told me.
Did he put down his badge and gun to take the position of elder, or the other way round?
That would be speculation on my point, but in my opinion, absolutely.
Okay.
I think he did. I heard he took an early retirement so that he could be more into the church, and that again is a third party, so I do not have proof on that.
Okay. And are you aware of how many other elders there are at his particular kingdom hall?
I think I explained to you earlier in the pre thing that when this started out and I started researching him, it was about him, and then it became later on not about him. And so by the time I was researching the Jehovah Witness for other concerns that I had, him in particular, he's just one little man, kind of thing. And so I did not look. I made a slight look to see how many churches there were in his area, and he's in a big area, so there are a lot.
Right. And men, I mean, it's only men who are allowed the position, but men aren't just handed the title of elder. It is earned through commitment and contribution to the organization. So your father must have been a committed and practicing Jehovah's Witness when he was approached and asked to take the position of elder, for which we think he then took an early retirement to fulfill that elder position. So do you have any idea how long he was a Jehovah's Witness for before he was asked to take the elder position?
I don't know if he ever held an elder position in any place. He moved around a lot, and that's a little hinky too, is he moved around a lot. And that's where I feel bad for the siblings that he did raise, because these girls didn't have a shot. I mean, they moved around so much. It's questionable how much they moved around. So I don't really know what he did in other kingdom halls before maybe before they were connected to the internet. Maybe he was able to do certain things. I don't really know. I know that his work took him away often. And so he would be gone at 6 months or so at a time. And I know that his wife, she continued her pioneering and that stuff and raising the kids, and he was off. So I honestly don't know if he held any position, but I do know that he's had this one for a few years at least.
And it's often the case that people in these high positions in faith-based groups like the Jehovah's Witness will also hold, or like the Jehovah's Witnesses will also hold a regular job. But at this point, your father stopped other employment altogether.
Yeah, he's retired.
And we've spoken briefly about some official job roles that he has held. Are you aware of any other lines of work that he was involved in before he became a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, well, that's how he picked up all the women. He was a paramedic.
Wow. All right. Okay. Yeah. So this man has really worn many different hats.
Oh, absolutely. That's why when I was listening to it and all of it was coming in at you at once, it was, I was like, this can't be true. Nobody does all this. Nobody, and you're just like, none of it made sense. And then you find out it's true. And that's where life gets weird.
So your father, who your daughter so lovingly named Roger Dodger,
yeah.
Roger Dodger has been a paramedic, a sheriff, a DEA agent. He's worked for the Secret Service, and now he's a Jehovah's Witness elder.
Yes.
Which is why I wanted to make sure we kept going over the details for anyone listening, because
there's I mean, that's pretty much clear. I'm sure I'm missing a couple things. I'm sure my sister's gonna, when she hears this, she'll be like, that's not what you missed this. I'm sure I'm gonna hear it. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it.
Kind of portrays he
was also in the Army, and that's actually when he met. Was the Army? The Army, I think.
Security guard at her college.
Well, he was a security guard at a college. But that's so. But when she met him, he was in the Army, and then he was discharged. Yeah.
Honorably discharged or dishonorably discharged?
Not dishonorably, just he had a condition, he couldn't be in there. It's nothing. It's just something at that time they didn't allow.
Right. Okay. So medical discharge from the Army.
Yeah.
So there's not particularly anything that's sticking out about that part of his life that is. Oh,
he was married to 2 women at the same time during that part of his life. So
and that is where we are going next. So you are the only child that Roger Dodger had with your mum.
Yes.
But as we have mentioned, there are many other brothers and sisters that Roger Dodger had with many other women.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to work out. I'm just trying to work out in my head the best way to order everything. So I'm making notes as we go. Oh, like an investigation. So
you get the string.
Yeah, that's what I need, the red string and the pins.
Yeah.
So the timeline that your daughter spoke about on her TikTok video says that in 1968, Roger Dodger married his first wife.
Yes, I believe that is true. Yes.
That we know of.
I might have that day. I don't know exactly the day they got married, but yeah, brother one is, that's brother one's mom. Yes.
Right. So he marries his first wife in 1968 and has his first child, brother one.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1971, he marries his second wife without divorcing his first wife, which means that he's now committed bigamy.
Yes.
And has child number 2.
Well, no, that one actually didn't end. It actually ended up really quickly. Brother number 2's mom found out and was a wonderful lady. She was not going to be part of it. She left, but he did know that she was pregnant. So he did know about that child. Yes.
So wife 1 and child, and then wife 2 finds out about wife 1 and child, and she leaves him during her early pregnancy.
Yes.
Okay. So in 1971, the same year, Roger Dodger finds another partner and has a third child.
Okay, so this makes it very hard. There were in that particular child, there was more of a free love situation going on.
Okay. Don't feel like that's particularly uncommon in the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah.
In some parts of America.
And that's definitely it was the 70s. Let's just go with that.
Okay.
So yeah, that child it actually was very much a surprise to everybody, I think. So yeah, that would be I think that's brother 3. Are we up to brother 3?
So 3 boys in a row.
Yes.
Okay. And brother 3, has he done a genealogy test?
Yeah, brother 3 actually did. Yes, that they actually, him and sister 2, he and sister 2 were connecting during this thing and trying to figure out who was really the biological father, because they were some confusion of whether it was one of Dodger's brothers or whether it was Dodger, because there was some moral issues with the other brother as well. So
okay. So we've got 3 women and 3 children.
About 1972 is when he meets sister 1 and my mom. And my mom was the youngest. She was 15 when they met. And he actually lived with my family and moved to a different state with my family at one point.
Wow.
And he was still seeing the mom, and she was driving in from another state because she thought she was his one and only too. At that point, I think seeing my mom, he was engaged to my mom. She says he was engaged. He's claiming he doesn't remember being engaged, but like I said, she's never lied to me. So.
So has he divorced all of the women at this point?
I think so.
Okay, so he only married the first 2. The third one was a fleeting night.
So when he's dating my mom, he's using son number 1 as his wingman to endear my mom and family. So literally son number 1 was hanging out in our home. I have pictures of him with my aunts. It's definitely it was his wingman.
Hang on, but so you had no idea this brother existed, but you've spent time with him.
I've actually always known about.
He's divorced both wives and had a fleeting night with partner 3. He's then living with your mum at 15, 16 and your mum's family.
Yeah, he had just got out of the military, and he didn't really have any place to go, he said, and so my family took him in.
And now things are starting to connect. It's like that map thing we talked about before we hit record.
Exactly, yeah.
Maps connecting. So your mum is then falls pregnant with Roger Dodger's child, and your family are not supportive of her decision to keep to continue with the pregnancy.
There is a claim. The first thing he said to me is, well, your mom said she had an abortion. Well, okay. First of all, my mom was 15 and she had just saw him with another woman, and she was very upset. And she said that, yes, she was going to California. She was going to do that. And then she came back from her little hiatus, trying to figure herself out, went to go talk to him, and he was already married.
And this is married to partner number
6. Yeah. My mom was gone just less than a week, and he was already married within days. Yeah, so when she went to tell him that she didn't do anything and she wanted to work it out and all that, he wouldn't let her speak and just kept yelling at her to get away, because I think he knew that she wouldn't do that. So I think that it was definitely he didn't want to know, and he was already married. He actually moved upstairs apartments while she was away with his new wife with the furniture she gave him.
Oh my goodness. Right. So he's married twice. He has a one-night stand. He meets your mum, lives with the family, has a sexual relationship with your mum. Yes. The details we're not aware of. At this time, he is also with another woman.
Yeah, he's with the sister number 1's mom as well, and sister number 3, actually.
Yes, but
with part number 6, who he is, I will say, still married to this day. They met and married in days.
This is why I was confused. So
yeah, that will confuse everybody. Yeah,
on your timeline, and this is so horrible, but your mum is listed as partner 4, which is so horrible, because it's just like that's not an individual, is it? Partner 4. That's just like when you're given like a prison number.
Honestly, that's how he treats them as well to this day. Just like they're just nothing.
She's with him, and she has you, and your on this list that I've got, your child 5.
Partner 6 already had a child, so she already had a daughter with somebody else from a previous relationship, and so that particular sister it would be, I guess, a stepsister. Yeah, stepsister. But in my family, we don't do that. So she's just sister. So, but he raised her from a small child.
And she's the only.
There's another one. Yes, that's the one that vetted me, is the one that they raised together.
So there is child.
There's 6 and 7. 8 okay. We're waiting for. We know the 8's out there. We just haven't got them yet.
So, right, let's summarize this and then move on. So we've got wife 1 and child, wife 2 / bigamy and child 2. We've got partner 3 and child 3. We've got partner 4 and child 4. And then we've got partner 5 and child 5, partner 6 and child 6 / 7.
Yeah, that sounds about right? Yep. He's got
that is wild. And let's just reiterate the fact that this all happened between 1968 and 1973.
Yes.
And he is still married to partner 6.
Yeah, yes, he is.
And they, together with the 2 daughters, are practicing Jehovah's Witnesses. And you mentioned
practicing Jehovah's Witnesses. I would say that I think it would be fair to say that the other 2 are not are not in the same practice.
The 2 daughters.
They're supposed to be, I think. I'm not really sure. And that brings to modern day hypocrisy that I'm sure we'll go over, but that's yes.
Right. So the wife, partner 6, she, as you mentioned, she's continuing with her pioneering and commitment to church related activities and events. So that is, I think, what a traditional Jehovah's Witness might look like and how they may present to the wider public. So that's something recognizable. The 2 daughters, I'm sure we can kind of chat a little bit about that situation as we go on. But the reason that we have spent so long going over this convoluted and messy situation is because the wider subject that we want to talk about on this episode is how people in positions of power have questionable pasts or presents that should make everybody question their positions. Yes. And your father, or Roger Dodger, or however anybody wants to talk about this particular individual, he is not representing the Jehovah's Witness faith as an individual. He is not every Jehovah's Witness.
He's living two lives.
So yeah. I think it's important to make that distinction, that we are not in this episode trying to say that every single Jehovah's Witness will have questionable motives and a questionable past and present like Roger Dodger does.
No. I've known many Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're lovely people. I mean, really sweet people, very kind people. I have nothing against the people, I have against the people in power that should not be.
Yes, and that, I think, is the main takeaway of this episode. So if everybody's kind of wondering what we're doing here and when we were going to get to the point, this is the point. And in the notes that your daughter made, there was a gap in your father's history between 71 and 73, but you mentioned there that he lived with your family in 72. So does that answer that question?
Oh, no. That was only for a short amount of time, actually. He only lived with my family for a short amount of time. There are indications that even after he got married, that he didn't change his spots too much. So we're waiting for that to come.
Right.
So I'm not sure if it ever will. Some people, like I said, I would have never done the DNA test. That was not my thing. So had it not gone this route, I probably would not have found out about any of this. So I'm not sure if we'll ever find another person, but there is definitely some time gaps there that were like, he seems to have a pattern, So
you don't meet up with your siblings very often, but you do occasionally meet up with a few of them. And you said in some of your writing to me that you had your first meeting with your eldest brother since childhood, of course, early childhood, in October 2021, and a sister who is 34 days older than you, which just was wild to me.
Yeah, she's 34 days older than me. We all meet up as often as we can. Everybody has their lives. A few of us are in California, so it helps out a little bit, being able to meet up and see each other. Yeah, I just met. You and I had just started talking when I had finally got to and to brother one. He's the brother that got me to really wanting to do this. A lot of these kids he knew about, and he kept everybody apart. And he did that, I think, so that his indiscretions didn't get found out. And when I talked to Dodger the first time, he had made it clear that they didn't want us to get a hold of brother one. They were waiting for him to come back to them, is what he said, actually. And, so I was thinking, we were told that that brother one didn't want anything to do with anybody, did not contact him. He had said this, and this was all a lie.
And this is all coming from your father.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so when I finally went ahead, and even though we were told not to contact him, I went ahead and contacted brother one. And when I did, it wasn't anything of what they said. And so this is where it started really coming to focus that he really hasn't changed, because you can say, hey, I was a bad guy in the past. I really was, but I'm a different person right now. But the actions may not be as severe, and you may not be leaving a lot of pregnant women behind. But the fact is that everything he does is for him. It's not for the church. It's not for the people. It's for him.
And is he aware of the meetups that you have with your siblings?
Yeah, he won't speak to me. So he won't actually speak to me directly. So when we met up with, it was told that we found brother one, and that we were told not to find him. So one of the siblings went ahead and told Dodger and his wife that we found brother one, and we were talking to him. and they weren't real thrilled. I mean, they weren't really happy about it. And so they were very concerned that we were talking about them. And that was a huge concern with them, was that we were talking, they were the main subject. And so I thought, well, I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. So I sent him a text and said, hey, that's not what it's about. It's literally just wanting to meet, siblings that we should have always been with. And he wouldn't answer me, but his wife did. And she basically told me to have a nice life.
Right. So you've reached out to her and she hasn't responded, but then you reach out to your father and she is then responsive.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
Nobody's going to want all these kids coming into your life when you just got the life that you wanted. So,
and I think he has good reason to be paranoid or worried that you might be sitting down and speaking ill of him because of the situation you found yourself in.
That's always the icebreaker when you meet a new sibling it's obviously the icebreaker. You're going to talk about them. It's just how it is. You're going to talk about the other siblings. They talked about me. Yeah, I'm sure there's a grapevine for everything, but it literally becomes just so not important later on. And we have our own lives. So it's more focused on our lives and building a relationship as siblings, even though we weren't raised together. So that's more the focus nowadays. But yeah, he is still, I'm sure, very concerned, and I'm definitely labeled the troublemaker for sure.
Do you know if the Jehovah's Witnesses are aware of his actions or his previous involvements?
One of my sisters is a very, very, very sweet woman, and very trusting and believing. And he had told her that he has shared this with his flock. I have doubts that the rest of the story has been shared. I definitely have doubts that they shared me. I think that you can get away with, hey, guess what? We have these new people in our lives, and this, you can make it sound good, and then a year later, hey, guess what? I think I highly doubt. He's very much about image. I highly doubt that they know the extent of this.
Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes if people have questionable pasts and they do find themselves in higher positions in faith-based groups, they will often use themselves and their own circumstances to tell people how lives can be turned around if you follow the scripture, if you stick to the guidelines within the church, if you follow the doctrine and
sure.
Confess and depending on which faith-based group you're talking about. But you've alluded to the fact that even though your father might not be involved with a number of women simultaneously anymore, which is definitely something that the Jehovah's Witnesses would not stand for, right, or be seen to encourage.
Sure.
Even though I do believe that it is something that happens in all faith-based groups, no matter how strict the doctrine is.
Yeah.
You have mentioned that there are other things that your father has done or is doing since his involvement with the Jehovah's Witnesses, which makes him a questionable leader after his baptism and his enrollment into the position of elder.
Yeah, he now I understand that the rest of us are considered worldly. I truly do, and that they can't obviously be part of this, but he is well aware that his other two daughters are not living the lifestyle they're supposed to. He is very much aware of it. They're not living anywhere close to, I would consider, the doctrines that I've come to see that is their beliefs and their belief system. He has no problem with not shunning them. Right. I mean, he would never do that. But he is able to judge other people's children and just decide the fates of other people when they're not living the same lifestyle. They're really not.
So for argument's sake, let's say that one of his daughters was involved in something that maybe caused for disfellowshipping, and somebody that wasn't his daughter was involved in the same thing. The outcome for the tribunals or maybe his daughter wouldn't even be asked to go before the elder council, the outcomes of those two situations would be remarkably different.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm being so different is both of those two were baptized, so that makes it a different situation. Once somebody's been baptized and not following the same rule, there are, and you can go through their Watchtower teachings, there's just tons of arguments for shunning them and shocking them back into Jehovah, and it's just crazy to me that you can keep destroying families. I mean,
Do you have any examples of some questionable things that his daughters have been involved in? That you don't have to go into specific details, but we've had a few people come on the podcast and talk about situations where they have been disfellowshipped for things that do not seem particularly extreme.
Okay, so without going into too many particulars, we'll go with one of them is a professional boxer. And that's probably not a good thing to be when you're a Jehovah's Witness. The other daughter, she is in the, I guess, health and beauty entertainment industry. The medical advice that the Jehovah gives and the medical advice that she's had has not been the same.
Okay, so kind of perhaps there's been some body modification that's happened at some point.
Well, she actually was very ill at one point. Again, I wasn't around for this, but she was ill. She did have some medical issues. And so some of it was a reconstructive issue, but I'm not even sure that's okay. But some of it, I suppose, wasn't. It just, and he knows. And that's my point,
right?
Is that's okay for these girls because there is no way they're ever going to shun these two girls. And so that's fine. I respect that. That's your kids. You love your kids. I respect you don't respect it for you do that, but you're teaching a whole different thing.
You mentioned in your communication with me some examples of when your father has been particularly abusive through his narcissism. And I don't know if you have any examples off the top of your head that you can give us that kind of reinforce what you said about how he is still.
Well, literally his entire career, they were in the Jehovah Witnesses while he was doing all the things that he was not supposed to. His wife was pioneering that he was doing all the things that he wasn't supposed to, and it didn't matter to him. You know, if you were so committed to this organization and you're so committed to Jehovah, you would be giving up these things that you wanted. But it was more important for him to fulfill his goals and his ambitions, and then say, okay, now that I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and put that away. Now I'm going to be a good elder. But you allowed yourself to have these experiences. You allowed yourself these careers. You allowed yourself to have that, and you are stopping others from doing that. And that's not okay. That's hypocrisy.
Do you have any examples of the activities and things that your father was taking part in whilst his wife was pioneering that might reinforce some of the things that we're going to discuss?
The holding the gun was one thing. He like I said, he's ran for office. He was a sheriff. I mean, I don't think it was a big town, so I'm not sure if he had a lot of competition, but it's still an elected position. He's not always been the best boy during the marriage and during a Jehovah Witness. He's had some questionable relationships. These things don't switch. And again, he's moved so many times. I honestly don't know how his two daughters could have even had a chance at a normal life, of how many times they moved them.
So even though he took an early retirement and then took the position of elder, the things that came before that, he was still a practicing Jehovah's Witness, just not an elder.
Just not an elder.
So he was taking part in some things that might get another member of the church disfellowshipped.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Why do you think he was able to?
I've never been able to figure it out. I really haven't. I why he was able to pull this off. I don't know. I don't know if he donated money. I don't know what the reasoning is. The first conversation I had with him is he let me know that he was an elder and they did their pioneering work, and this is how they live their life, and we need to respect that, and never asked one question about us, at all.
I know that between Kingdom Halls, there is an exchange of personal information of the records and logs that are kept of each individual that attends each Kingdom Hall. So perhaps it's that his pioneering and his wife's pioneering efforts, and perhaps any contributions financially or otherwise, are what is documented and moved on to the next Kingdom Hall. So on paper, it seems as though he is a conscientious and committed member of the faith.
Yes.
So with all of that, we've laid the groundwork for our discussion around ethics, abuse of power, and hypocrisy. And of course, your biological father's actions do not represent the Jehovah's Witnesses as a whole. His actions also do not represent that of all the elders within the religion. However, Absolutely. What it does bring to question is, who are the people, or men, I should say, that are appointed to make decisions about people's religious and spiritual journeys? What gives this particular man, abusing his status and power, living in sin, or living a life that is not pure or faithful to Jehovah in the ways his congregation are expected to be? And what does it say about a religious organization who will put a man of this caliber in this position of power? That gives him permission to decide who should be disfellowshipped and shunned for their sexuality, their choice of clothing, their choice of partner, for choosing free will, for not volunteering time, pioneering and spreading the word of Jehovah. The bigger question of today's episode is, who is leading the congregations of high demand religious groups? Who really are these people? Do we really know enough about them?
Definitely don't.
And those things that are on paper, those records that exist, are they transparent? Are there parts that are being withheld? Who really are these people? And if they do not uphold the values and purity that they expect from their congregants or their flock or their followers, or whichever word you want to use, why on earth are they in positions to decide who is no longer allowed to maintain their position within their chosen faith and family? Because, like we've said a lot of the time on this show, if something does not allow you to be as pure on the outside as you are on the inside, or perhaps something on the inside doesn't allow you to be as pure as the church or the faith tells you should be, or actually not even the faith, the people in charge of the faith, because the scripture is adopted differently by every faith-based group to fit their beliefs and their values. What is it that allows these men to make these decisions around who can love who, when, how, and in what capacity? Who leads these congregations into holding councils where men and women who have been horrifically abused have to relive in excruciating detail that abuse? What gives these people in these positions in the faith-based groups permission to ruin lives when they stop families and friends from being able to see each other, to be at their deathbeds, to be at their weddings, to enjoy the birth of their children? If my friend or family member comes to me and tells me that they are attracted to the same sex, or that they don't feel comfortable being addressed the gender that they were given at birth, why does that mean then that they are not allowed to practice their faith? Why is there a man in a position with this particular background and questionable present able to tell me that I can no longer practice my faith because I am attracted to who I am attracted to, or because I have had premarital sex, or because I have fallen pregnant outside of wedlock, And why are so many elders now being taken to court because they have not dealt with abuse in the correct way? They have actually covered up cases of abuse and claimed that it was dealt with within the walls of the church, which is not how the laws of these countries work,
right?
In America and the UK. So the big question of today's episode is to kind of look at everything I've just said as a whole and try and understand it a bit more, and to also understand that not every Jehovah's Witness or elder is going to be using their positions to exploit, to manipulate, or to kind of live the best life possible for them, which includes individualism and free thinking and sinful living, like lust and all of these things that us worldly people might take part in. But it's also to understand that people in these positions exist and are taking part in these things. So with all of that aside and me off my soapbox, let's kind of get into it a little bit and have more of an objective discussion.
That was kind of what was interesting to me about all this is like when we spoke with him, now he's an elder already by the time I'm talking to him, he's an elder and doesn't want to talk about his past. Yet you're going to sit on a committee to sit there and listen to somebody's thing, but you're not willing to talk about your past. You want others to talk about theirs or things that they have done. And I found that so just unbelievably weird that so you want your flock to be completely honest with you, but you're not really willing to be honest about most of the stuff that you're talking about. So he doesn't hold one under scrutiny himself, but he can do that to others.
And his daughters or one of his daughters has told you that he does speak about himself as an example in the Kingdom Hall.
He told her that she's done. Nobody goes to the Kingdom Hall with him except for him and his wife.
He claims to talk about himself and his experiences in the church, yes, but he won't speak about his past with you.
No.
Or your other siblings.
He was okay with it at first until there was just so many things that weren't, his story wasn't adding up. Like a lot of it wasn't adding up. Like he was claiming he didn't know anything about anybody except for a couple of them. And it just wasn't adding up. And so the more I would question him on these things, the more he started shutting down. And eventually I got a kiss off text saying he just didn't want to deal with me anymore. He didn't want to talk about the past. And all I do is berate him. And it really wasn't berating. It was more like, wait, that's not what was said. That's, kind of thing. But one of the things that I did find interesting about this guy, I never talked to him without being on speakerphone with his wife. Not once.
So perhaps even if there was the opportunity for him to speak honestly and candidly, he may not want to if his wife is present in the room.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that my mom's age was a big deal, considering he was 22 at the time and she was 15 when they met. So, considering the Jehovah Witness recent lawsuits and stuff, I'm sure that did make them a little nervous, and they were definitely trying to control the narrative.
You mentioned that once this became all about Roger Dodger, you started to kind of take the narrow focus and widen it bit by bit by bit to kind of look at the situation overall and other examples of where this particular type of misleading the people of the church may be happening in other areas. And I feel like that's going to be key to discuss in this episode, so that people don't have the opportunity to say you're just a disgruntled
that's
child.
It's not a vendetta. Like I said, he started out about him, and trying to figure out what the weird behaviors were. They're very, like I said, very hot and cold people. And sometimes people confuse polite with nice and good. And it's not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
So when they're very polite people when you're around them, but they really didn't want anything to do with most of us, to be honest. They would prefer not to. But then I started looking at it, and I started talking to people and started doing more research and talking to other people that had been in this religion that were willing to talk to about me or talk to me about it and what was going on. And the more I started hearing their stories, the more this was just like, wow, he's just one person. There's a huge problem here. There's a huge problem with these people being basically their lives dictated to them. And these people dictating it have had these experiences, and they've done these mistakes, and they're not allowing someone to have it. And if one of these young kids in there misses out on education or relationships and all of that because of one of these elders, what a shame.
So we need to go over a few things before we can move on to the next part. And that is to make sure that we have explained that if somebody was to go to prison for a crime they committed, and they served their time, and they successfully rehabilitate into the community, or maybe there's no need for rehabilitation, but let's say a person successfully rehabilitates and integrates into the community, then really that person's crime should kind of stay as, they've served their time, and that's what the sentence is for. Sure. Punishment for that crime. So the person should not then live the rest of their life being punished further. Absolutely. Because their sentence ended when they were released. So what's important to make sure we explain here is that the actions that your father has shown since becoming a Jehovah's Witness, and then since taking up the position of elder, where he then has the power to disfellowship people, which will result in shunning, where family and friends will or should, under church doctrine, cut all communication with the shunned person, which means that if you were born into this movement, if you're a second or third generation Jehovah's Witness who has grown up around family and friends that are also practicing Jehovah's Witnesses, if you are disfellowshipped from the church and shunned, you will lose communication with everybody that you have ever known in your life. And you are on your own, isolated, alone, and trying to reintegrate or trying to integrate into everyday life that is typical for people outside of the church that you may never have experienced before, having been a member of a high demand religious group. Right. So we are not condemning your father for the actions that he...
No, not at all. And everybody's got a past. I've got a past. I've done things that, that I probably shouldn't have. I'm sure that everybody has. It isn't that. It is more although it is not as extreme, he's still living the exact life he wants to live and not worrying about the rules applying to him. And that is the hypocrisy I'm trying to say. It's not his past behavior or how many kids he had. It's the fact that he's still not living the same life. And he's actually on the move again. He literally just sold his house and they're moving again soon. And so I'm not sure if his past is starting to catch up with him or what the deal is, but they're on the move again.
So we're not criticizing your father for his past. We have had to discuss it at length to understand the person that he was in the 60s and 70s and how actually that person looks as though he still exists in some capacity, even though your father is in this elder role, which comes with huge responsibilities. And yes, a person might move around every day of the year, and that doesn't mean that they're up to something nefarious or criminal. But given your father's past and repeated actions, it does seem questionable. So for anybody that's thinking, you can't condemn a person because of their life before the church, some of these things he was involved in took place during this man's tenure within the church, and he may have taken
it's important to say he wasn't an elder. Oh, I messed up something. It's important to say he wasn't an elder at the time that he held a badge. That in fact he was a member of the church, but he was not an elder.
So we are trying to make sure that we explain that it's not condemnation. It's just looking at the patterns of behavior and applying them to this individual now as he exists. And if you are a listener who moves around a lot, that doesn't mean that we're going to look at you and say you're up to no good. But given this particular person's past and present, it does raise some red flags. So now that we have put all of that into place and hopefully stopped any potential criticism from people who are like, you can't just condemn a person.
I have no doubt people were going to still criticize and say this isn't vendetta. And I will be honest, when I first started looking into this, it was about him. And then it became a symptom of something else. Like, wait a minute, if he's doing this and he's still doing some pattern behavior that is questionable, he can't be the only one. And then the more I started hearing other people and what they were dealing with the elders and things like that, the more I realized that it's yes, not every elder, but it's more than there should.
Right. Yeah. So how are we doing, Mike? Is it sounding okay?
Oh, am I still here? Yeah, sounding good.
Good. Right. So my next point is, if there is anybody listening who is still hesitant on this particular story, especially when you have mentioned things like I started investigating or I started looking into, things a bit outside of the situation, there is more to kind of back up the conversation, because you are actually a licensed private investigator.
Yes. Well, so it's something that has been on and off in my life. It's something that we've been doing for a while, on and off. And I hadn't been doing it for many, many years. It just so happened that I realized that, wait a minute, I do have some skills I could use. But I didn't want to waste that on him. So we haven't investigated him yet, or at all, actually. And we probably will never do that and to clear the story, because it really doesn't matter. But one of the things that did come out of this is brother number one has been shunned from the family for 22 years,
A long time, yeah.
About 22 years. And we were definitely told not to contact brother number one. They didn't want us to contact him. We weren't supposed to, he didn't want to have anything to do with us. They didn't have any idea why he was not speaking to them. It was pretty making sure that we knew not to contact him. And then, I did and found out none of that was true. And it was true to it. There were like always a grain of truth to it, but not the entire situation was not what they said. And where you're talking about not being at people's funerals or whatnot, that these people have been separating for their families, so they're not allowed to attend this. That's exactly what happened to him. He was not allowed to attend the grandmother's funeral. They drove right by his house. He didn't even know his grandmother had died. And this is somebody who basically knew Roger all his life, and they didn't even contact him when his grandmother died or his aunts died. None of that. They just didn't. They drove right by his house. And so then I started to realize, so with brother number 1 and 2, he knew about these guys. He knew about them, his life, and he kept them separated. And he had claimed that brother number 1 said he didn't have any brother number 2 or something like that. And neither one of them remember that. So he started separating situations and keeping things apart and making sure that his past wasn't brought in. So he's already destroying families, but at least it has some DNA with him. But he kept these boys apart, and they could have really used each other. And he made no attempts to get them together, made no attempts to do any of that. He just wanted to keep the one brother away, because the one brother was aware of some extracurricular activities he was associated with. And right after that, it seemed like they stopped dealing with him and stopped talking to him. And again, I think it's a pattern of separating your behaviors. So,
and when it comes to kind of investigating this particular personal story of yours, that's kind of the depth and level that you've gone to. You've tied that you've kind of.
That's where it became very clear what I wanted to do with this, and it became very clear that people are being lied to and separated from their families, and they're being told horrible things like your mom was probably a prostitute, or your dad didn't want anything to do with you. Your dad, these family members, they don't respect your religious belief. They didn't want anything to do with you, and they're being lied to. And if you're raised in an organization like this, you don't know any different not to believe this. So it started becoming apparent that what we needed to do was offer to help find somebody for them. If you're in this organization or any of these organizations, any of them, and you're being told somebody doesn't love you, or they abandoned you, or whatever, there's a good chance it's not true.
And you've had firsthand experience of that happening.
Yes.
So in terms of your authenticity as a private investigator, you spoke about you and your partner Mike has an engineering business, and you help with that. So the PI work is not at the forefront of your life, but it does exist, and you do take part in it.
Yes.
And you have had successful cases where you have reunited people or found long lost family members and been able to reconnect people. Before we hit the record button, you spoke of working with a close friend. You were able to reunite them with a lost loved one.
Yes.
And then mentioned that you might not do too many cases with close family and friends, because if you're not able to have that, positive result at the end of it might be too heartbreaking for everybody involved. So
it doesn't always go like you see on TV, and that's the tragic other side of it, is that sometimes when you do find these families, maybe they didn't want to be found, and that is another side of it that is really. It's very disheartening to see, and it's really, when it's a family or friend, it's even harder to watch. But luckily, this went very well, and she seems very happy, so that actually went very well.
And but also before we hit record, you mentioned that you've been given access to some special databases where you can do some background checks on people. So again, that speaks to your authenticity as a private investigator.
Yeah, so we do have some we have some databases that you wouldn't be able to have. Things like I like people do the people searches and stuff. Yeah, we do have databases that others wouldn't. We are credentialed to have those. So when you talk about investigating your father and his actions, and then deciding to investigate some other situations within Kingdom Halls and the Jehovah's Witnesses as a whole, if people want to question your integrity and your authenticity, then there are some kind of credentials that you have to back up your claims. Yes.
Right. So now we've got all that good stuff out the way. Where did you go to after you realized that you wanted to look at this kind of on a wider scope? Did you start in a particular place?
I think I started with everybody else. You start on YouTube. You start watching videos, you start listening, you start really listening, you start understanding that, saying things like, oh, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. These are all, everybody jokes around about it, but there's no joke. There's like no joke to any of this. And so you start realizing that you live in a bubble. We live in this world that we talk and joke around about cults and mind control and all that. But the fact is it's happening, and it's not a joke. Not everybody wants to be there. You need to have the free will to be able to leave if you want to.
I believe as well that another element that needs to be added to that sentence that you've just said is that everybody needs to have the free will to leave and still maintain contact with their loved ones and everything that they know, just without the commitment to the church, whether that's commitment to the church activities or the pioneering or other things that may be expected of you. in any faith-based group, whether that is the Jehovah's Witnesses or other things. If a person that comes from somebody that's practiced Judaism their whole life, if they no longer want to adhere to the strict dietary requirements within that particular faith, again, is that grounds for shunning? I don't believe that it should be. So right. and I understand that it's extremely easy for me to say that as somebody who is not involved in one of these extremely demanding religious groups, but the overall conversation again is around, if people want their own free will, they should be able to exercise that, and if that comes in the form of leaving the church, that the retribution for that decision should not then be that you lose contact with everybody because of that right. decision.
Yeah, exactly. I think that taking relationships away from people in order to control them is insane to me. And I wasn't brought up like that, but I had heard somebody say that they were told the reasons they were being by an elder, the reason they were doing this was to shock them back to Jehovah. And I don't see how that's what they're doing. I see it as you're shocking them back to man because they're afraid of the man who condemned them, not Jehovah. And so the idea that you're having to listen to this man as if he was some type of prophet or God himself, the word of God, it's insane to me. And, it is very hard to understand putting that kind of faith into something. But I think that people should, if they want to question it, they should be able to. And I definitely think if you have questions, you don't feel like, things are fair, I think that you should be able to question that.
And after you started to look at YouTube videos and other source material, did your decision to investigate this further take hold, or
no? We're just starting out. Like, it takes a long time. We just found out about all this a couple of years ago. It really takes a long time. Literally, by the time this goes in, you are probably the first person that we've actually said this to out loud that we've done that. We're doing this. Usually we're very much under the just keep people's personal business to their own. So we don't talk a lot about other people's businesses,
right,
or other cases, because it's other people's business.
And we're not going to mention the name of the PI company that you run on the show, but if people are interested in reaching out for some help and assistance from you and Mike, which is being offered pro bono, then people can get in touch with me, and I can mediate an interaction between you and any potential victims or survivors that have experienced the shunning and disfellowshipping, or perhaps manipulation and lying around family members, not wanting contact with them, and any of the stuff that we've mentioned on the show before. Or maybe a particular person has carried out some particular crimes and is still in a position within the church after horrifically abusing somebody, which I don't know if that's happened. I've just said that out loud off the top of my head, so I kind of guess I'm playing the advocate, but that's just something that we spoke about pre-recording. So I think it's important to put that out there, that you're not promoting your business on here, and I think that speaks to your integrity as an investigator and as somebody that just wants to bring some of these issues into the public domain, and to get people talking about them, which is hopefully what this content on the podcast does. So
we lost a lot of time with the one brother, and it seems like only 2 years, but the brother that we found last, and the one that was shunned from them, he almost died last year. He almost died. So we almost didn't get to meet him.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And it just, when you hear that, and he's just such a great guy, and we he's just a riot. We just love being around him and love talking to him. And that almost didn't happen because of somebody's selfishness and their lies. And we want to take, if I don't want anybody else to lose out any time with people that they could have these great relationship with, or I don't want anybody to lose out on an education because somebody like this told you not to go get one, or you have to do this job, or pioneer instead of work here. I don't want people to lose out on life because of somebody else.
Yeah, which again, it in itself is difficult, because a person with an extremely clean record that may have actually lived as purely as they are supposed to and followed church doctrine to the letter may still request those things of a person, you know,
well, that's where it got really scary. I think I told you that, you know, of course, getting ready for this podcast, I kind of was a little nervous. And so I was going to, you know, do some prep work, and I opened up the Watchtower, which I read regularly, because, you know, you can't say something against somebody if you don't understand what's going on, you know, kind of thing. So at this particular Watchtower on the February 2022, I think it actually has a article talking about complete devotion to the elders. And what does it say? Something about obey. It was
during the Great Tribulation, we may receive instructions that seem strange, impractical, or illogical. Of course, Jehovah will not speak to us personally. He will likely provide direction through his appointed representatives. And an
innocent sentence like that. Yeah, that's from their Watchtower. And it seems like such an innocent sentence. And if you really look at it, you're like, wait, what?
So you know, it's kind of obey the word of the elders without question.
It actually does say, I didn't pull that one up, but it does say somewhere in there that you are supposed to have complete obedience to your elder. And when you really think about that, you're going to give your entire obedience to this elder in order to prove that you love Jehovah. That seems to me bizarre, but maybe not to them. But these men are not, they're not living the same lives. Some of them are not living the same lives that they're trying to preach out. And he definitely isn't. And to see a scary sentence like that, to see that it may seem impractical and illogical, that's scary.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think if there are clean-cut elders who follow the religion and the faith to the letter and do everything that is expected of them, and have never stepped a foot wrong within the faith itself, they will still be in the same position to encourage people to live a certain way, to expect certain things of their followers and congregants, and that's where it's difficult, because there's a line to draw between changing the entire faith itself and the problematic regulations and doctrine of what Jeffrey Wallace talks about in his book, A Voice from Inside, Notes on Religious Trauma in a Captive Organization, because he talks a lot about how there has to be either some really deep investigations and people actually looking at the shunning process, and kind of how that needs to change because of the trauma that it inflicts on a person. But he is a physically and mentally out Jehovah's Witness, so even though he has these thoughts, he understands that he needs to remain anonymous and use a pseudonym, because otherwise he will lose his family and friends. So even though he says that we cannot change the faith as a whole, we can talk about what things need to change. But what we're trying to talk about in this particular episode is maybe not how elders tell you should live when they are not doing the same thing, because some of them might be doing the same thing. We are talking about how certain people shouldn't be in certain positions where they may exploit and they may manipulate, and they are being extremely hypocritical, and that's the problem.
Right. To question an elder and to question his behaviors, or to question to be concerned that this elder telling you to do something may not be. They actually address it in this thing that maybe they have a past or something like that, that you're supposed to just not work, you're blindly supposed to follow him because that's following Jehovah. But I just, he's not living the same life. I know this particular one, we didn't bring it up, but we've known a few other elders that my husband's worked with, and they were living two different types of lives. And it's definitely, it's not something that I think I don't think he's a unicorn. I don't think he's so rare that somebody should blindly follow others. I think blindly following a man, you're not following God. You're following the man.
The difficulty that comes with pure obedience and blindly following a person's rules and instructions and guidance is that if they follow the Watchtower and the special book that the elders are given to work from, if they follow that manual to the letter, then they are encouraging people to be as close to Jehovah as possible, because they are following church doctrine. However, somebody in that position could then request things that are not in that manual, that are not in that guidebook, that are outside of the realms of what is written in the faith-based law and the text and the scripture. And that is another line that is important to discuss, because we know from open current court cases that there are cases of physical and sexual abuse that go on within the kingdom halls. Over here in the UK, there are a lot of open cases around abuse that has been covered up, historical cases of abuse as well. And
when we think of youth cases, we also are thinking about kids. And I know that there are many women that are being abused in this organization in particular, because it is kind of a man-dominated religion, and they're being abused. And we don't normally, I don't know if we obviously need to protect the children, but there's women still being abused and raped and made to feel bad about that as well, and made to feel like they were the instigators. And
do you feel like all genders are at risk of being abused within faith-based groups and any high demand group? Of course, all of us are at risk of abuse, but in such insular communities where the holy text is used to abuse and exploit, which again comes down to spiritual abuse, which is a whole other thing that so many people experience on a daily basis that nobody even talks about or is even aware of or even realizes is a thing. And then there's religious trauma and then there's spiritual abuse, and there's all these things that come with using the doctrine to actually manipulate people, which is just like a whole other thing. But despite all of us being at risk of some type of abuse or experiencing on a daily basis some type of abuse, people in high demand situations, I feel, are more vulnerable or prone to this because of the environments that they exist in.
Well, yeah, they're separated from everybody. It is definitely a yes or them and us type of thing. They're completely separated, so they don't have that support to fall back on. So like if I question somebody and I'm talking to my husband, he's right there for, but they don't necessarily have that same privilege.
Mm-hmm. I think that the word privilege there is important. And, so when we're talking about abuse against women, there's abuse against men.
There's physical abuse and men and emotional abuse of all of them. I mean, in particular, a gay man in this organization would be treated so horribly. And my daughter's gay, and the idea of that, a church that I believed in or would treat my child any differently would not make me happy at all. I would definitely be questioning my organization, but they're not allowed that privilege.
So we know that there are cases of abuse happening within these faith-based groups. The very difficult thing to comprehend is the fact that some abuse will be justified because it is happening under the orders of an elder who is to be obeyed without question.
Yep.
If you do question the motives or actions of an elder, that's grounds for disfellowshipping, which again means shunning from your family and friends. And when we had Black Sheep come on the podcast and talk about her experiences, she spoke about the physical and sexual abuse that she endured that was covered up, and how when she was forced to sit in the same room as the person that sexually assaulted her, and then was told that the interaction that happened was her fault, and that the person that assaulted her in the first place was not going to be punished right now because eventually he would have to answer to Jehovah, right, is an example of the problematic teachings within the church and how some of that needs to change. But if that particular outcome is what is coming from the manual and the handbook that's being followed by the elders, that is something that we hope the law will pick up on and change. And that is why some of these historical cases are now going through the courts. What is difficult about what we're discussing and looking at on this show is if there are elders in these positions that are the ones carrying out this abuse, who are they?
Or hiding other people in abuse, not necessarily saying an elder is all these elders are doing things, but if these particular elders, if an elder knows about someone's past or knows about someone's abuse, and you're shuffling that person to a next kingdom hall, you're part of the problem. And whether that elder is abusing somebody physically or mentally themselves, you're hiding someone. And that's definitely an issue.
And we've had cases of people where they've come on the show and said that there are members of the congregation who are known to be sex offenders and are still trying to groom young people within the congregations. And it's happening, and the elders are aware of it, and they are disfellowshipped for something that is nothing to do with sexual assault or harassment. And then they are allowed back into the Kingdom Hall after going through the steps to get reinstated, but then still continuing to kind of follow the young members around and kind of borderline stalking. And so we know this happens, and again, it's not universal across all Kingdom Halls. I'm sure that there are congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses.
I have heard people tell me that some of their congregations that they were in at one point were really good people. And again, it isn't the people. I've known some Jehovah's Witnesses. They're lovely. And they really just want to practice their religion. They just want to live a good life. They really are lovely people. And I'm not saying all of the leaders are bad either, but there is definitely a problem with an organization that asks you not to question a leader, to blindly follow and obey a man, a mere mortal. It seems if you stop becoming a religion when you stop letting people think for themselves.
Yeah. And again, if an elder is carrying out some form of abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, financial, whatever form it takes in, maybe all of the above, or they are covering for somebody who has or is carrying out any or all of those forms of abuse, who are the elders accountable to? Because we are supposed to follow them without questioning them. If you go up to the governing body, who is the highest level within that particular pyramid, they write the manuals themselves that the elders follow. So it comes to question that you don't question them either, and you follow and you obey the governing body too, because they are the direct line to Jehovah. So
now they're supposed to have like somebody in between. I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology, but the elders, I think there's a district elder or something like that drives around, and I think he's supposed to handle the situations that the Kingdom Hall can't handle. And then if he can't handle it, it goes to Bethel, I believe. I think that's right. Yes. So so there is supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be very much run like a government branch. I mean, obviously that's what they think they are going to run, the government branch in heaven, I guess. Again, probably not the term they use, I'm sure. But
I think it's there's elders, and then there's circuit overseers.
That's it.
And then there's district overseers.
Yeah.
And I think that the governing body comes.
And I think there's a
after.
false illusion that then there's checks and balances. And I think that because of we have all of this and we don't have a bishop or we don't have a pope, is what I kept hearing, so, it's almost like a democratic thing they're trying to, but it's a false illusion. It's all an illusion.
And I do believe that particular hierarchy is what allows abuse to go unreported or unrecognized, because there is no accountability in the way that we might see outside of church walls. If somebody was to report abuse to the police or law enforcement in their state, whatever that looks like, because I know it varies throughout America, their procedures would look very different to the Jehovah's Witness procedures. And I understand kind of keeping church and state separate, but if the rest of us have to follow the law, I don't believe that the Jehovah's Witnesses carrying out their own internal investigations around certain accusations or reports of abuse is ethical. So again,
no, I think it's a PR move. It's definitely a PR move. They're going to keep it down. They've been very critical of the Catholic Church. They were very critical when the Catholic Church came out with their own discretions and abuse cases. And they were very critical. I've read a lot of their articles criticizing them. And I think it's a PR move to try to hide that, because they're the religion, the only true religion. So you can't have these marks against your true religion.
No.
And so I think that if you talk a lot of stuff about one religion, and then it turns out that you're doing the same thing, I think that kind of, again, proves that some of their doctrine is false.
So you said that you've just really started with this project. What are your plans going forward? When you have the time, do you have an idea of where you want to take things, what you want your investigation to look like, what particular things you're going to research and look into?
So it started with Jehovah Witnesses, and of course, you're going to talk to the victims of Jehovah Witnesses, and then I started listening to your podcast and hearing stories from other religious organizations, and then it became, again, like I said, we all make jokes. We talk the joke about the Kool-Aid, and we all, I'm going to start, my own cult, and I want worshipers. We joke around, and it became not funny. It became a point that these are people's lives. And they are having to put up with this stuff, and they're having to do that. And when I realized how much lying was going on to these people to keep them separated, it became that's my focus. That is our focus, is if you've been told that your loved ones don't want anything to do with you, if you've been told that they're in an insane asylum, if you've been told all of these things, there's probably no truth to this. And we want to help these people find those loved ones that are missing them, and would, I'm sure, gladly open their arms to them. And if you've been told these people don't want anything to do with it, we'll talk to them for you. We'll have a conversation of what you've been going through and if we can just bring these people back to family that accept them unconditionally, that is our goal.
So to summarize, we've looked at your biological father's timeline in some kind of attempted chronology, and we've talked about why it's problematic that a person with his background and his present is in a position like elder in a faith-based group like the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have a shunning process.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about how that is not unique to him. He is not the only person who will have this particular personality and be in this particular position. We've talked about
bad men aren't going to look like bad men. Bad men don't have the evil mustache. They don't have these things that we'd like them to have. They don't wear the black hats. A bad man is going to look like a good guy, and they work hard at that. And that's where we're trying to remove a little of the mask and say that, look, it may not be all of them. I'm sure there's some lovely elders out there who really believe everything that they're teaching. But then the other side of the coin, there's the ones that don't, or the ones that are hiding that don't. And if you are destroying people's families, if you are ripping families apart and you're not living the same life, that to me is more of a sin than any going to a Metallica concert or whatever these sins of these people have done. I think that is far more of a sin than what they are committing.
So although not all elders will be these types of people, it's likely that there are a number of elders that are operating in their kingdom halls.
If you own a business and you turn around and there's been some embezzlement and you're the one with the books and the records and all that, and someone said, and you can't very well say, I didn't know. And I think that that's what they're doing. They're saying, no, we didn't know anything about this. And if you get to that high of a position where you are an elder, you know some things that your flock is not privileged to know. And they do that on purpose. I mean, they have a whole book of it for the Jehovah Witnesses of things that the other people, regular Joes in the congregation, are not allowed to know.
Yeah.
So you don't get that high without knowing about some sketchy things.
No, that's the height of information control, and really reinforces that there is a pyramid or hierarchy in play that doesn't just make all practicing members children of Jehovah. It clearly creates an us versus them, inside the organization that already exists at length between those in and out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, between people that have never practiced and people that have been disfellowshipped, which creates an even wider scope of us versus them. And of course, this is all stuff that we could talk about all day, stuff that's been covered on the podcast before, and stuff that is probably going to baffle minds for generations to come, I'm sure. Yes. And perhaps they'll even be talking about new religions that don't even exist yet in the same way that we're talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses now. But the main point is that we're questioning leadership.
Yes.
We're questioning the power they have. We're questioning the integrity and honesty of the people in those positions, whether everything we know about them on paper is true, whether other people in similar positions or higher are aware of the particular actions that those in those positions are carrying out, those with the responsibility to really ruin lives, which does end in people taking their own lives and becoming clinically depressed and a lot of other really difficult ill mental health problems that people suffer because of these shunning processes. And then, so we're talking about how there needs to be a dialogue and recognition of that. And I know that there is, and hopefully we're contributing to that. The other side of it is that we are here to say that there is a service that exists where professionals can help you to locate loved ones who you may have been told no longer want communication with you, or that they are off living a life of sin somewhere else, doing particular things, that they've gone to work on an oil rig, or that they are, like I think you mentioned, working, taking part in sex work in another part.
Yeah, that was, I've actually heard that one a lot was told to people was that their parents, or usually the mother, she's now a drug addict and a sex worker. I'm betting it's not true. It's one of those situations where they're going to do everything. It's a circle of abuse. They're doing it. They're separating them from anybody who might support them so that they can control them. And we just want to take that out of the equation.
Mm-hmm. So with both of those things out there, kind of the discussion around positions of power and the discussion around the ability to assist someone in tracking down a loved one. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or contribute to our discussion today to bring into the public domain? Anything you want to give advice-wise to people that may have had similar experiences with realizing that they are part of a family much bigger than they were told about or aware of, and how to navigate that difficult situation, or whether somebody's been
everything I did do the opposite. Yeah, that's kind of the when it comes to that, I take it slow. No, and I think it can be overwhelming if you find yourself in a situation like that where you just have a lot of siblings, and just take it slow and get to know the person, not the story. And because all of us are so much more than this particular person that father does. Mm-hmm. And so make it about them and not about the person that has caused the pain. And that would be the most.
And what about you, Mike, as somebody that's kind of not directly involved in the situation, but not somebody who's finding out that they have a number of unknown siblings, as somebody that's kind of been on the periphery, just on this journey with your wife, Laurin, is there anything that you would add to listeners around whether it's their experiences as Jehovah's Witnesses, if it's their experiences as a shunned family member, or their experiences of finding out that they have up-teen number of siblings that they never knew they had?
I think my role was to be just supportive. We've met a number of the new siblings, and for the most part, they're just fantastic people. It really kind of bothers me that we've known about the oldest brother. Yeah. Well, Laurin's known about him most of her life, and we were just told different stories, and it turns out he's a fantastic person, and we're really lucky to know him now. And what a shame that has been kind of taken from her for so many years. So
yeah, that's the hardest part, is that these, it isn't even me, because I did know I had the power to do this if I wanted to. I chose not to. I had no idea he had no part of the biological father, and had I known, I probably would have reached out sooner. To be honest, I reached out as probably of act of rebellion. You don't tell me what I can and cannot do. Like, you're not going to tell me I can't connect with somebody, and that's just, if someone's telling you that, maybe that's the takeaway. If someone is telling you you can't connect with somebody because they don't want you to, don't let that stop you.
Hey, maybe we're not giving your father enough credit, and perhaps this was his plan all along.
Oh yeah, that's no.
He's left children all over the country to reunite and have this really incredible experience of realizing that there are just so many people that you love and you get on with. And then when he realizes that you're not all communicating in a positive or continuous way, he's like, oh, well, I'll tell them that they can never talk to each other again, and then they'll all connect. And then here you are.
Yeah. Oh, so, no, I don't. They were not happy when this came out. When I found when I decided to buck the system. So they would definitely. I like your spin, but I don't think that was it. Yeah, that probably wasn't it. That's basically my whole thing of this, is that, again, it went from being mad about this situation and how much damage he did to other people, to realizing that he's not rare. And that's what if that's the biggest takeaway of anything, is just don't let somebody like this, and he's not rare, tell you can't do something. Mm-hmm. You can't go to college. You can't have a relationship with that person that at work that you think is a great person. You can't do all of these things under these guidance, because these people are not following the same rules.
And when you initially messaged me and said that you had a story to tell, that you weren't yourself a cult survivor, but you were aware of somebody who was involved in the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you started to kind of tell me a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that you really were just passionate and motivated to highlight the hypocrisy and also the difficulty in being estranged from loved ones, not always necessarily through choice, but rather through force. I thought that it was so important to invite you onto the show to have that discussion. And even though you're not talking about your experiences within the faith itself, but rather, your personal experience as somebody who is currently involved and is currently hypocritical in their role, it kind of reinforces the fact that it is possible because it's happening, but it also shows that you can look at the organization from the outside and recognize the red flags and recognize the high demand control systems in place, and how if somebody was to come and pioneer to you, it may be worth having a discussion with them, but also holding on to your critical thinking when those interactions do happen. Even, it can come in the form of, in many forms, people talking about this great group that get together and do yoga on a Thursday night, or people that get together and get on the cross trainers with the person that leads their exercise classes. It could come in the form of going to the local bakery and eating different types of cupcakes each day of the week. Whichever form it comes in, it's always good to have these conversations to talk about what they might look like from the outside looking in, as opposed to people who have come from the inside and are talking about it from the outside. So
anybody who tells you not to question them, you question them. That's all there is to it. If someone's like, don't question me, believe me, I'm a good guy, you need to believe then there's some
like
red
that needs to go
there.
on my coffee cup or my doormat. If somebody tells you not to question them, you question them.
Yeah. And that is kind of something that I truly believe now. And this organization is telling you not to question them. And that to me is more of a thing that you need to question. You need to ask the hard questions. And if they're not willing to answer it, why are they not willing to answer it? Why are they not allowing you to question them? And that should bring up some red flags, because nobody should mess with your relationship with God. That's between you and God. And for someone to tell you that they have to be in between you and God is nowhere in the Bible.
I'm just going to make a note of what you just said, because that's like the best. Like when I have those episodes where I'm trying to say something and it takes me about half an hour and it's like one sentence and I can't like formulate the sentence right. You've just done it exactly there. No one gets to question your relationship with God. That is between you and God. Yeah, that's it. I always say, like, who are we to say who can and can't practice their religion?
And I'm not trying to tell people to get out of this religion, and then I don't want it to come up that and saying they're a bad religion. I that's not for me to say. But if they're taking your liberties, if they're taking your ability to think for yourself, if they're taking away your ability to question, then that organization is hiding something.
Mm-hmm. And they're not applying the same things to themselves. That's the main point.
And that's the point of telling the Dodger story is not to humiliate the man, not out of anger, or I honestly, if I never talk to him again, I'm good with that. I really am. It isn't about that. It was an awakening. It was an awakening to a bigger, again, we do take the cult stuff so lightly. I find people joke about it all the time. And then when you start seeing and you hear the stories and you actually, I can empathize, but I don't know what they've been through. I can't feel the same way. It becomes, I don't know, a horror story. Just things that I take for granted, like being able to argue with my dad or question, things like I take that for granted and they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it is literally just your God-given right to question that is taken
Sometimes
away.
It's even things like dyeing your hair a different color or wearing a certain type of makeup. And I'm just talking about me as a woman, cutting my hair, whichever hairstyle I like, wearing makeup. Sometimes even in some faith-based groups, using tampons, using sanitary pads, So in some faith-based groups, I've been told that they're not allowed to use tampons because it's, sinful to insert something into your vagina that isn't your husband's penis. So
yeah, it's these little laws, and you're not like, that's not a law, that's a pet peeve. It's not in the Bible. You don't particularly enjoy the subject, so you're putting this as law. So it's demands interpretation of it. And I know that comes up to man's, people say man's interpretation of the Bible or whatever. This particular Jehovah Witness, they actually are being sued about their Bible. So there is some questioning there too. And it seems that the more lawsuits that come up on for them, the more they're clamping down, like, don't question us. And it's God's word that we're saying.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Because if it's in the media and it's in the news and people happen to read, because if you're not actively looking for articles and media that speaks negatively about Jehovah's Witnesses, you're probably not going to see it unless you're looking for it. However, when there are active court cases and trials and things taking place that warrant them being placed into mainstream media, you are going to be seeing things that are negative, that are written about your faith in a bad light. So then you start to think, oh my goodness, really? That can't be right, because I'm part of the one true religion. And everybody that is around me is supposed to be practicing in the same way that I do. So surely that's not right. Surely there haven't been cases of abuse covered up. Surely that person didn't experience that sexual assault or that financial abuse. That can't be right. And then you think, oh, maybe I'll go and look a bit further and a bit further and a bit further. So it makes sense that there is a clamping down and a severity in the releases of the Watchtower that say, now is the time to obey more than ever and not question and double down on making sure that people kind of don't stray, because with the technological age that we live in, you only have to stray onto page 2 of Google and you might be gone forever.
Yeah, it's definitely a rabbit hole. When I did start this, it was to see why the behaviors. Again, there was definitely a us against them kind of thing. When the siblings were around them, they were very polite, but once they were gone, they really, they drove by one of my siblings' house twice, never even stopped to see them. That's not even the sibling they shunned. This is another person. They really just, they do they would never travel to see you. We were all asked to take our DNA off of the DNA websites and stuff. So it is literally what, if you chose to go see them, that would be fine. But they definitely would never have done it a different way. And we were all told not to just show up to their house because they have to make arrangements before. I don't know if that's with the church, because nobody ever stays at their house. So I don't really know what that's about. But I definitely think that, again, is another red flag that there's 2 lives being lived here.
And I'm just making an assumption here, but it may be different if you decided to convert yourself and become a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, because I do feel like there is a different attitude to people who are in than to people who are out. And of course, that's orchestrated purposefully because you don't want to interact with too many people outside of the church. But it's very conditional friendships and very conditional love bombing and very conditional relationships that are formed through kind of, as long as you are a part of this, we will go out of our way for you, and we will invite you around for dinner, and we will create these long-lasting friendships, as long as. So there's the conditional side.
We're going to be your everything, and that's the point, is that we're going to be your everything, and you can't have anything outside of here because we're all you need now. And that is, no, that's just that's cruel.
And that's an assumption I've made. That might not be what your father and his family are doing, but it would certainly fit the profile for some other situations that have been explored on the show where that particular thing has happened.
Yeah, they've never actually said, look, we don't want anything to do with you. Like I said, they're very polite when you're in their presence. They'll definitely not go out of your way. One of the siblings that he was raised, she has definitely gone out of her way to make sure we do that. She's not happy with the situation, has gone to extraordinary lengths. And even these lengths have been seen in these cruel actions have been seen by him. But because this is a child who was baptized Jehovah's Witness, they don't mention it. They don't care. They don't care about the poor behavior that this person was told not to do. We're not talking about a child anymore. We're talking about a woman in her 50s acting like a child. And all those behaviors are just ignored or whatever because she is a Jehovah's Witness.
I had a quote that I will end the episode on here that came from Mary Mahoney, a former Children of God member who wrote an incredible memoir called Abnormal Normal, which is this month's monthly memoir book, which it won't be by the time this episode comes out. Oh no, will it be?
No, this is
no,
February.
It won't be. Yeah, it won't be. I was thinking, I thought we were in March for a second then, but no, it's the start of February. But it will be the start of March when this episode drops. But she said, you have to be utterly nothing and let God shine through you. It infantilized all the adults of the group because they had to be like children. The problem was these adults did not grow up and become responsible, normal adults. They remained children because they were so heavily controlled. You can't become an adult unless you learn to make decisions and live with the consequences and grow and make mistakes and grow. But no, you couldn't do that in the cult.
No, that's, yeah. That pretty much sums up everything.
So what you've just said there about a grown woman acting like a child, it's probably exactly what Mary was alluding to in her writing there. So I feel like that's a very profound quote to end our episode on. So unless that you have anything else, or if Mike has anything else to add to the conversation, to highlight, then I think we've come to the end of our discussion.
Well, thank you so much for taking time for this and listening to this crazy story.
Thank you so much for sitting down and talking us through it, all of the different pivots and turns. And I mentioned at the start, we might get whiplash because it's kind of all over the place and very confusing. But
it's definitely an iceberg. There's a lot on top, but what's underneath is just insane. So it's definitely like an iceberg.
Yeah, definitely. I feel as though it's a wild story, but I feel like it will still be relatable to some people who are listening on some levels, even though it seems so out there and unbelievable.
I'm sorry for that. If it's relatable. I do hope that it is relatable, and I do hope that we don't come off. It's not a vendetta. It really isn't. It is a symptom to a problem that we knew was out there, but we didn't know how much it was. And we can all turn around and say that's just cults, or we can do something to help.
Absolutely. And you know, just having a conversation about it is the start, and then putting that conversation out there to the public is one step further, and then the PI work is another level on top of that. So we're creating our own iceberg and our own hierarchy, and that it feels great to be on this side of activism. And I'm so humbled to be able to sit down and have these conversations with people who are willing to talk so openly about personal experiences that are traumatic and have been difficult to live through, things even just like adoption, through to things like finding out that you've got, you know, a ton of brothers and sisters that you kind of knew about but didn't know about, and you know, talking about having Mike as an anchor to walk you through all of those things and be there to support you. So, you know, it's really touching for me to be able to sit down with people and have these kind of electronic face-to-face chats with everybody. So thank you so much for your time, for coming here and sharing your personal stories with us, for the PI work that you have done and have offered to do for others who, again, if they have something that they would be interested in or something that they think Laurin and Mike can help with, feel free to reach out to me at cultvaultpodcast.com or find me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod, and I will communicate for you to Laurin and Mike of your concerns and requests.
And once again, we're not offering, we don't want it, it's not a fee. We want to make sure that know that, because people think that it's going to be expensive, that kind of stuff. This isn't where we make our money, and we're not trying to make money off of a cult. And so this is, if you're looking for somebody, we're willing to do it, help you find them.
I think that's hugely respectable and commendable, offering pro bono work to people who urgently need it. So if anybody has that request, please do get in touch. And Thank you so much, Lauren and Mike.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Oh, now the dogs will start barking. All right, have a good one.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye. That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.